Hey everybody, welcome. There's the bell that we're right on time. So good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world, and welcome, welcome, welcome entrepreneurs. So drop in the comments what you want to know about burnout and being an entrepreneur and or a CEO. So if you have bottom line responsibility for a company and your livelihood depends on it, then this is for you. And while we're waiting for everybody to jump on the live stream, I am going to teach you why stopping burnout is urgent for entrepreneurs and all the lives that they touch. Their families, their employees' families, their customers, their suppliers, like their suppliers' families, their suppliers' employees. And if you can guess why, then comment on this video. Everybody that gets it right, why this is so important to such a wide range of people to stop burnout, especially in entrepreneurs, then I am going to put everybody who gets this right in a draw. And this is for being on time and because I know you're serious about wanting to stop burnout. So make sure that there's going to be a free draw for free training. Let me put that way on stopping burnout. So make sure that you stay tuned to the end of this to make sure that you know how to take the next step in stopping burnout. So the first story that I am going to share with you is my own. So you will see why that I am qualified to do this. Why am I qualified to teach entrepreneurs that have everything on the line to stop burnout? But before I do that, I'm going to share a little bit about me. So I had burnout. I was running a successful, growing, multi-million-dollar business, and I almost died when I was 25 years old. I was so tired that I drove off the road when I was driving, obviously. So luckily I didn't die, but I could have very easily. If it had been the day before, I would have been driving a lot faster and almost for sure I would have died. I was lucky. Bad weather saved my life. I went to the doctor after this happened and they didn't know what was wrong. So I had to figure it out myself. I started meditating shortly after that, and that was one of the keys, the main key to unlocking this problem. So, who here has had a severe, potentially life-threatening scare due to burnout? Sorry. Maybe it wasn't a car accident, but maybe it's health that's out of control. And I hate to say this, but this includes thinking of suicide. And if that is you, this is the hope that you have been looking for, because as you will see from the stories that I'm going to tell you, it's pretty easy to stop burnout in 5 weeks if you do 3 things that are easy to do that most people just won't do. So ask yourself right now, what is the cost if you continue with burnout to your business and to your life? Well, here we go, and here's my story. So I'm pretty sure I know how I got into burnout, and it was more thinking that I needed to fit into the culture and that more work equals success. So I was in a business culture that was very last minute. It was very reactionary, and everybody was kind of running around stressed and yelling at each other. And honestly, heart attacks and strokes were at a very young age, in 30s, and in some cases even younger, were rampant. So the main belief of business culture at that time in those industries, and unfortunately it spread to way more industries, is that more time equals more results. And as we can see today, that's not true. It equals more people sick and more people taking a long time to do things, but not necessarily getting results. So for me, this is what it looked like. I got up in the morning. We had a factory. I actually ran a couple of them that ran 24 hours a day. And so I would get up sometimes in the middle of the night to go in and go see an evening shift, or sometimes it would to be in extremely early, which is what happened to me on that day when I almost died. is that I was going in at odd hours because I had to do things that I didn't get done the day before, and that I had to check up on people to make sure that things were okay, because the system was out of control. Now, this isn't about system stuff, although it is. The main system was my brain and my head, and the brains and the nervous systems of the people around me. That was the real system that was out of control. And we're trying to make up with it for action. So, I would get up early. I would work the long hours. Very often, I would be in on the weekends as well. A normal work day for me was 13 hours. I would start at 6 or earlier in the morning, typically go home at 7 at night, and sometimes even later if something wasn't done. So, and throughout the day, it was a very challenging business culture. Like, things would be changing all the time. And kind of the joke was, the rush stuff is already done. We're working on the emergencies, and for miracles, we need an hour. And so everyone was kind of running around, being reactive, angry, yelling at each other, and not thinking straight, making a lot of mistakes. And I didn't even realize how many mistakes I was making and how much time I was wasting every day, because I thought I was being the good entrepreneur, spending all this time being in the middle of everything all the time. Now, some of you might say, I don't do that, but if you're working that many hours, yes, you are. Your brain just can't see it the way that mine couldn't see it at that time. So, and it's also very difficult to see it, which was also the case with me when everybody else in the business culture is doing the same thing. My employees were doing that. My suppliers were doing that. My customers were doing that. And most of my peers had the same kind of work hours as me. So they were doing the same thing as well. So it didn't register in anybody that this isn't healthy. It's not going to lead to anything positive, or anything capable of a positivity that it's capable of. And it led to a massive meltdown. So there were big business challenges. There was always the threat in the industries that we were in, that if you didn't do a certain thing, the penalties for non-performance were huge, like $1 million an hour for some customers if you were late, and we only had a couple $1 million a year business. So one mistake was the end. For 1 hour, if we were late on something, that would have been the end of our business. So the pressures were enormous and constant, and it didn't let up. And not every business has this today, but we are putting those pressures on ourselves even when they're not there. And the truth was that in this business, going about it the way we're going about it was the thing that led to a lot of extra cost and a lot of extra challenges. So to get on with my story, what happened was, as you heard, I was up in the middle of the night, and I just couldn't do it anymore. My brain and my nervous system just went to sleep. Now, the thing that most people don't realize is that it's pretty obvious if you're driving a car and if you're falling asleep and not being able to be control of the vehicle. But this is happening to people all day, every day, and they're not realizing it, because it's not always a nodding off, although you might get that as well, like the kind of jerks that you need to stay awake again. But your brain is taking time out because it can't do it anymore. The nervous system's out of whack. So how did I get out of it? Well, first of all, I went to the doctor, and they weren't very much help. So they did the general medical stuff, and because I didn't have any other health problems, they really weren't able to figure out what was going on, because burnout is often confused and almost always confused with other things. So they said it could be this, it could be that, but you don't have the symptoms of that. So they basically just said, we don't know. And good luck with that. So it was up to me to figure out what it was on my own. Now, luckily, at the time, I had just started meditating, and it was because of meditation that I was able to get the clarity that I needed to start to figure out what the problems were. I had the I was actually, remember it, I was sitting one morning, it was actually after a yoga and meditation class, and at the end of that class, I had the dawning realization, if I stay on this path, I'm probably not going to live to see 30. And if I do live to see 30, I'm probably going to be in really, really rough shape. And it was this realization the one that came right after it, that there was a much better and a much easier way to do this, and that harder didn't mean more results and harder didn't mean better. And I had already been an athlete in the past, so I knew from my athletic experience that struggling doesn't get you results. Doing the right things to get results gets results. And luckily, I learned quite a bit of that from sports. So I started applying that kind of thinking to my businesses. And I started looking after the thing that needed to be looked after in order for my businesses to be successful. And that was my brain and my nervous system. And that spilled over into my overall general health, my mental health, emotional health, and physical health as well. I started sleeping through the night and getting better sleep. And that led to a whole bunch of other things. And then what I wanted to eat changed, and I started eating better. And all of this was as a result of me meditating and starting to take some time out to reset my brain and my nervous system so that it wasn't stressed out and it wasn't burnt out anymore. So the result was that I got more done in 20 hours of work per week than I used to get done in 60 plus hours of work per week. It was higher quality. It was less mistakes, and that's what a lot of the work was in the past. It was fixing mistakes or redoing work, and that just didn't happen once I got my nervous system under control. Now, the other 5 hours per day that I worked was all about creating new business for myself that helped a lot of other people that also had burnout, interestingly enough. So I've been doing this for a very long time. Now, people say that's not possible, and they argue with me on this point quite a bit. But the thing is a burned out brain it's not capable of seeing what it takes to do things in less time because you're using a different part of the brain. The only way to get out of burnout brain is to get it to calm down, to get the reptilian part of the brain to calm down, to stop firing, and to start activating the higher thinking parts of the brain. And when you do that, you can see different ways of doing things and paths and avenues that just weren't available to you before, even if they were sitting right in front of you. And that's exactly what happened to me. I realized that the majority of the things that I was doing all day were a complete waste of time, and they were a result either of something in the system that wasn't working correctly, or that somebody else just wasn't doing their jobs, and for a variety of reasons. Maybe they didn't have the training, they didn't have the knowledge, something was in the way, or maybe they were just the wrong person in the job. They weren't really suited for that role. So people say, okay, this is basic general business stuff, but the problem is when you're in burnout, you can't see this stuff even if it's sitting right in front of you, like it was sitting right in front of me. And then when I changed the burnout and stopped the burnout, all these things became extremely obvious. And I was able to see how to get my job done in a fraction of the time I was doing before, like 20 hours per week. And then I started, only did 20 hours per week on that. I spent 5 hours working on creating a new business for myself that helped a lot of people in burnout I wouldn't have had time or the presence of mind to do that had I kept up that 60 hours per week. So people say, why does this happen? And it's because when you're using the part of your brain that is burnt out, it doesn't have access to many of the neural networks in the higher parts of the brain. And when I say higher, I mean things that do problem solving, creative thinking, interpreting relationships, emotional intelligence, preventative, recognizing patterns, remembering things. Like there's just so many things that get lost in functioning of the brain when you're in burnout. And if you start to reverse that process and eliminate it entirely, you start to see whole new ways of looking at situations that you just can't see when you're burnt out. So that is why it is so critical to stop burnout, and why you can get those better results after you have stopped burnout in a fraction of the time in most people's cases over what they were doing before. So I just want to do one other thing here. I understand, for a point of view for many of you, that they think that what they're doing is a matter of life and death. And there are people where it is life and death. And I'm not talking about those people here, although they need to learn to manage burnout as well. There are people that if they don't do their jobs right, people can die. So if that's you, there should be something in your industry to prevent burnout. And yes, if you have life or death at stake and you're burnt out, you need to do some functioning, or at least be able to work through it. Everybody else, there's no excuse for that. Entrepreneurs especially have picked up this toxic culture where there is burnout and there is nothing life or death at stake. So it makes no sense to do it. So when your brain is burnt out, you just don't have access to the same kinds of thinking, and it just continues to perpetuate burnout. So the most intelligent thing to do is to stop the burnout. So let's take a look at this. What happens when burnout gets too far? Well, first of all, your business is 9 to 12 times more likely to fail. That's been on the screen. And you are far more likely to have a life-threatening disease. You're far more likely to feel suicidal or to even commit suicide. You're far more likely to have a bunch of family problems, including problems with children, major relationships. I don't want to say divorce, but breakup of primary romantic relationships. You are way more likely to lose friendships, and you're way more likely to misinterpret and not feel the connection to people that actually really care about you, and misinterpret people that are trying to help you as threats. And that's what burnout brain does. What happens to business? Unfortunately, either they get hamstrung in their growth, they don't have the resources that they need because you're spending so much money and you're just spinning wheels in terms of money to keep the doors open, rather than actually putting money into things you're investing for growth and you're investing for opportunities that make sense. So the majority of businesses that are run by people with burnout, that are burnt out, whether it's yours or you're running somebody else's business, a lot of them fail. And especially when they go through challenging times, because their burnt out brain can't see the opportunities and they can't see the way out. So what I want to ask you today, the health costs are enormous. The business costs are enormous. The family costs are enormous. Why isn't this the number one priority for anybody running any kind of organization or team? So if you know that this is a problem for you, I've invited a number of people to events. So, and there's one that I'm going to be posting on this channel for tomorrow. It is how to stop burnout. So if you want to come to that event, I will be putting it as a live stream on YouTube. You must subscribe to the channel. And as I said, if you are subscribed, you will get the notification. Make sure you click the notification bell for upcoming videos. And I will see you on the next video, where I am going to talk to you about the steps that you need to take and take you through some processes that stop burnout.